Ah, Christmas. The time for a bunch of expensive tat, baking cookies, snow, and being mad at Aunt Jean for giving you absolutely nothing, just like on your birthdays. But you may wonder, how did Christmas come to be exactly? And wait, I hear you cry. It was the day that Jesus was born, hence the name. And well, little Timmy, as you should know by now, names can be deceiving. I'm not a fish after all. So in today's video, we'll be delving into the history of Christmas. But before we get started, after doing the research into this, I got a whole bunch of different claims and stories, and while I was able to substantiate some of them, others I simply couldn't, especially when it came to the religious aspects of it. Who knew? Religion isn't consistent. So please keep that in mind while watching. The middle of winter has long been a time of celebration around the world, long before the advent of Christianity. Many cultures and peoples rejoiced during the winter solstice, when the worst of the winter was behind them and they could look forward to longer days and extended hours of sunlight. The Norse celebrated Yule from December the 21st, that being the time of the winter solstice, through January. In recognition of return of the sun, fathers and sons would bring home large logs, which they would set on fire. The people would feast until the logs burnt out, which could take as long as 12 days. The Norse believed that each spark from the fire represented a new pig or calf that would be born during the coming year. The end of December was also a perfect time for celebration in most areas of Europe, as at that time of year, a lot of cattle were slaughtered, so they would not have to be fed during the winter. For many, it was the only time of year where they had a supply of fresh meat. In addition, most wine and beer made during the year was finally fermented and ready for drinking. In Germany, people honored the pagan god Odin during the midwinter holiday. Germans were terrified of Odin as they believed he made nocturnal flights through the sky to observe his people, and then would decide who would prosper or perish. And because of his presence, many people chose to stay inside. In Rome, where winters were not as harsh as those in the further north, Saturnalia was celebrated. Beginning in the week leading up to the winter solstice and continuing for a full month, many of Christmas's traditions came from this Roman holiday. During Saturnalia, work and business came to a halt. Schools and courts of law closed, and the normal societal patterns were largely suspended. People decorated their homes with wreaths and other greeneries, and shed their traditional clothing in favor of colorful clothes. Even slaves did not have to work during Saturnalia, but were allowed to participate in the festivities. In some cases, they even sat at the head of the table while their masters served them. Instead of working, Romans spent the holiday gambling, singing, playing music, feasting, socializing, and giving each other gifts. Wax, tape, or candles were common gifts during Saturnalia to signify light returning after the solstice. On the last day of celebrations, many Romans gave their friends and loved ones small terracotta figurines, which may have reference back to older celebrations which involved human sacrifice. With the advent of Christianity, celebration of Jesus, or in fact any martyrs for their day of their birth, was largely regarded as foolish. Celebrations of birthdays in general was deemed foolish by many Christian leaders, and instead, they celebrated the day of the death for martyrs and other such individuals. Christmas in turn wasn't celebrated for many centuries by Christians, at least that we have any knowledge of. The earliest written report was one in 366. December the 25th was picked not only due to it being the date of the winter solstice, but Jesus also chose to be born on the shortest day of the year for symbolic reasons, because that's obviously how it works. According to an early Christmas sermon by Augustine, he wrote in quote, "Hence it is that he was born on the day which is the shortest in our earthly reckoning, and from which subsequent days began to increase in length. He therefore who bent low and lifted us up, chose the shortest day, yet the one whence light began to increase." Man, my atheist ass is starting to hurt from all this religion talk. It is also likely that the church picked this day to coincide with the pagan holiday, in an effort to not only undermine the established holiday, but to also appeal to a wider branch of individuals who could still celebrate their holiday, a practice that the Christian church used for other holidays, such as what is now Halloween. Many traditions continue from this time, such as the hanging of mistletoe, which is common in the Norse Yule tradition. Christmas played a role in the Arian controversy of the 4th century. After this controversy was played out, the predominance of the holiday declined, but it continued to spread to some degree. Other celebrations such as Epiphany overshadowed Christmas during most of the early Middle Ages. The holiday would regain prominence after 1800, when Charlemagne was crowned emperor on Christmas Day, and later major kings would be appointed on Christmas Day as well, such as Edward the Martyr and William I of England. Another common tradition to start during the early Middle Ages was that of the Christmas tree. The 8th century missionary Saint Boniface, apostle to Germany, is supposed to have held up the evergreen as a symbol of the everlasting Christ, and later it was supposedly adopted to wish for the coming spring. And by the end of the 16th century, Christmas trees were pretty common in Germany. The holiday transformed and became much more widespread in the Christian world following this time. In the 13th century, carols started to become common practice, owning back to previous tradition of mischief on the holiday, once again something similar to the carols sung during Halloween. The poorer echelons would go home to home and, throughout the carol, expect food, drink, or another form of gift from the inhabitants, causing them mischief if they refused. Following the Protestant Reformation, many of the new denominations, including the Anglican Church and Lutheran Church, continued to celebrate Christmas. However, in the 17th century England, some groups such as the Puritans strongly condemned the celebration of Christmas, considering it a Catholic invention. The calendar reform became a major point of tension between the Anglican Party and the Puritan Party in England. Following the parliamentary victory over Charles I during the English Civil War, England's Puritan rulers banned Christmas in 1647. They banned Christmas. Who do they think they were, Scrooge? This wouldn't last long, however, as massive pro-Christmas riots broke out all across the country, and in many cities, the rioters would have control for weeks, if not months at a time. The restoration of King Charles II in 1660 ended the ban, but many clergymen still disapproved of Christmas celebrations. In Scotland, the Presbyterian Church of Scotland discouraged the observance of Christmas, and though James VI commanded celebration in 1618, attendance at church was minimal. The Parliament of Scotland officially abolished the observance of Christmas in 1640, claiming that the church had been purged of all superstitious observation of days, and it wouldn't be until 1958 that Christmas again became a Scottish public holiday. In colonial America, the Pilgrims of New England shared the Protestant disapproval of Christmas. The Plymouth Pilgrims put their loathing for the day into practice in 1620 when they spent their first Christmas day in the New World working, demonstrating their complete contempt for the day. Christmas observance was outlawed in Boston in 1659. The ban by the Puritans was revoked in 1681 by English Governor Edmund Andros. However, many immigrants, primarily of German and Italian descent, were huge harbingers of Christmas celebration, so elsewhere in the United States, the holiday was commonplace, but it still wasn't exactly popular or widespread. Christmas fell out of favor in the United States after the American Revolution, when it was considered an English custom. It wasn't until the 19th century that Americans began to embrace Christmas once again. The Americans reinvented Christmas and changed it from a rancorous carnival holiday into a family-centered day of peace and nostalgia. The early 19th century was a period of class conflict and turmoil. During this time, unemployment was high, and gang rioting by the disenfranchised classes often occurred during the Christmas season. In 1828, the New York City Council instituted the city's first police force in response to a Christmas riot. This made certain members of the upper class to change the way Christmas was celebrated in America, and shift the mischievous style of celebration that had been common to something much more peaceful. In 1819, best-selling author Washington Irving wrote the sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon, a series of stories about the celebration of Christmas in an English manor house. The sketches featured a squire who invited the peasants into his home for the holiday. In contrast to the problems faced in American society, the two groups mingled effortlessly. In Irving's mind, Christmas should be a peaceful, warm-hearted holiday, bringing groups together across lines of wealth or social status. Irving's fictitious celebrations enjoyed ancient customs, including the crowning of a Lord of Misrule. Irving's book, however, was not based on any holiday celebration that actually existed, and was Irving's invented tradition by implying that it described the true customs of the season. Also around this same time, English author Charles Dickens created the classic holiday tale A Christmas Carol. The story's message, which was the importance of charity and goodwill towards all of humankind, struck a chord in the United States and England, and showed members of Victorian society the benefits of celebrating the holiday. The family structure as a whole was becoming less disciplined and more sensitive to the emotional needs of children during the early 1800s, which, it should have been commonplace by then. Christmas provided families with a day where they could lavish attention and gifts on their children without appearing to spoil them by the rest of society. As Americans began to embrace Christmas as a family holiday, old customs were unearthed. People looked towards recent immigrants and Catholic churches to see how the day should be celebrated. In the next 100 years, Americans built a Christmas tradition all on their own, which included pieces of many other customs, including decorating trees, sending holiday cards, and gift giving. Although most families quickly bond to the idea that they were celebrating Christmas, how it had been done for centuries, the Americans had really reinvented a holiday to fit the cultural needs of a growing nation. There is still one question you made me wondering though. What about the big bearded fat man in the sky? And where exactly did he come from? And besides that describing many people that fly in America, the history behind good old Santa Claus is a bit more clear. Santa Claus wouldn't be added until the 19th century, but his origins date back many centuries. Nicholas, born in what is now Para, Turkey in 270 CE, would become the Bishop of Mara, and later after his death, the only saint named in the 19th century. He was one of the senior bishops who attended the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, which created the New Testament text. He was well liked and very popular at the time, achieving a cult status. In 1087, a group of sailors enshrined his bones in a sanctuary in Italy, replacing a local deity known as the Grandmother, who was regarded by the community as a benevolent deity, one who would fill children's socks and stockings with gifts. Members of this cult gathered here and celebrated Nicholas's death every December the 6th. Later, the cult and reverence for the saint spread north to reach the remainder of the Germanic and Celtic pagans, where his figure combined with Woden, the chief god of Germanic tradition. Him losing his Mediterranean looks, Nicholas' appearance took on that of Woden, one with a long white beard, riding a winged horse, and picking up cold weather clothing. As the Catholic Church was still converting the pagans in Northern Europe, they accepted the celebration for St. Nicholas, but moved his feasting day from December the 6th to December the 25th. It wasn't until Washington Irving's The Knickerbocker History in 1809 that St. Nick resurfaced in the satire of Dutch culture, referring to the white-bearded horse-flying St. Nick, whom the Dutch called Santa Claus. Irving brought the character back into popular culture. Less than 20 years later, Union Seminary professor Dr. Clement Moore read Irving's book and penned "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," where St. Nick's place in historical myth was once again evolved, popping down chimneys, even though the man is fat as hell, and being carried on a sleigh by 8 reindeer, because he's fat as hell. Moore's St. Nick is one that was used by Coca-Cola in 1931, dressed in Coca-Cola red and sporting a jolly face to much acclaim. Thus he was born the Father Christmas we recognize today, a Christian saint, a pagan god, and a commercial ploy. I hope you enjoyed the brief look into the history behind the holiday of Christmas. If there are topics that you'd like me to cover in the future, say so down in the comments below. If you'd like to assist the channel in growing, then consider donating on my Patreon page. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time.